Welcome to the Relational Grace Podcast, where we share the teachings of Pastor Nick Harris, who taught us that Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. I'm your host, Amy Moffat, Pastor Harris's daughter. I am so thrilled to share with you this new series on the book of Esther. This story is filled with intriguing characters. I remember listening to this series at the beginning of 2020. Each week, I could hardly wait for the email to come with a link to these teachings. And now I am so excited to share them with you. We are beginning the book of Esther, which may be the most neglected book in the entire Bible. You see, very few people have ever attempted a sermon series on it, or even a few single sermons from this book, because the truth is, very few people even read this book as devotional material. Perhaps this is because this book is different than anything found in the New Testament. In fact, it's much different from what is found in the remainder of the Old Testament. That's why people tend to be a bit mystified by it. Then there's the fact that it's about a woman, which is very rare in biblical record. The truth is that there are only 3 books in the entire Bible about women, and all of them are similar to Esther. The other 2 books are, of course, Ruth and the Song of Solomon. All 3 books are indeed delightful, but each of them are a little difficult to understand, which is why our pastor will delve beneath the surface of Esther and discover what is hidden there for us. In the way of introduction, this much can be said for the book of Esther. It is a story of 2 angles, one of human love and the other of palace intrigue. As this series begins, our pastor hopes we will all be fascinated until we finally arrive at the conclusion of this awesome story. But nevertheless, in the end, we will probably wonder why this book is even included in the Bible. It does not mention the name of God, not once. There is no reference to worship or faith. There is no prophecy concerning Christ. There is no mention of heaven or hell. But beneath the surface is, in fact, some life-changing input. And yet, it is an amazing revelation of how God works through natural means to achieve His purposes. Our pastor will begin this new series with a rather secular title. So with that, let's kick off this new series on the book of Esther with the first episode titled, A Pair of Queens.
That all the things recorded in the Old Testament are only physical types and shadows of deeper spiritual truths. He wants us to understand that. In fact, he tells us that God first gives us the physical, and then he gives to us the spiritual. First the physical, then the spiritual. For example, first we have Adam, then we have Christ. Then we have Israel, then we have the church. And I can assure you, we can find those types and shadows in abundance in the book of Esther in the Old Testament. Now let me assure you, Esther is an authentic history book. I want you to understand that. The experience of Esther is not some myth or legend, and the things that we read in this book really happened in time and space. It is legitimate history. But these events can also be viewed as a kind of parable, a description of the human experience in this world. In other words, to some extent, this book is really about you and me, as well as being about a woman named Esther. So this morning I'm going to approach the material in Esther 1 and 2 in both its figurative and its historical senses. Now, we should examine this book because it helps us to see ourselves as we really are. And when we read it correctly, it's as if we are looking at ourselves in a mirror. I can promise you that. I hope that's what you see before this is over. That's the figurative sense of the book of Esther. But I want to begin this series with the historical aspects of this book. And as I do, I want us to see ourselves and our experiences in life in a new way. So let's begin by saying this. The first 2 chapters of the book of Esther are vitally important. These 2 chapters introduce us to the circumstances that lie behind the story of Esther. Now, what I see in these two chapters is what I call a pair of queens. In other words, two queens are involved. One queen is known as Vashti, and the other queen is known as Esther. Now, I realize that my title today, A Pair of Queens, is a poker term. However, I will admit to you that I know absolutely nothing about poker. Well, not nothing. I do know this. In a poker game, a pair of queens can be topped by a pair of kings or a pair of aces. Now, that much I know, and that's about the limit of it. But I want you to forget poker. See, I brought it up, but now I want you to erase it from your mind. Let me assure you, Queen Vashti and Queen Esther are not like the queens in a poker game. Now, they are actually quite like the queens in a chess game. Now, as most of you know, the most powerful figure on any chessboard is the queen. And here's the fascinating thing about queens in the chess game. On a chessboard, the queen is subject to the king, and yet her primary role is his welfare. And yet she is actually the more powerful of the two. The queen is your power broker on a chessboard. So, as I see the story of Esther, it's like a chess game, not a poker game. And keep this in mind. The events that are recorded for us in the book of Esther occur in a very select place. They occur in the empire known as Persia. Now, of course, that's Iran today. And isn't it rather interesting that I would pick this week to preach on this subject? Now, the empire is ruled by a great king, but did you know his actual name is never recorded? He is called Ahasuerus in the text, but once again, that's not his actual name. That name, Ahasuerus, is his title. You see, the word Ahasuerus is like our words czar or pharaoh or emperor. Now, it's my belief that Ahasuerus represents every single person in this room. He is you and he is me. As I go through this sermon, I want you to fix this in your mind. When I mention Ahasuerus, I'm talking about you. Now, God initially designed each of us to rule over our own kingdom. We have dominion. God has given us dominion, or meant for us to have dominion, just like Ahasuerus had over Persia. Now, let me illustrate God's intent for us. It's found in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27, and it reads as follows. Look at the screen. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have" what? Let them have dominion. Is this God's will? Yes. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over, now get this, all, how much is all? Over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Now, beloved, hear Pastor well. In the words that God spoke here, he tells us that we were designed to be like him. What is God's essential nature? He is triune, as you said this morning. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That is, God, by essence, is a triune being, and he designed you and me to be triune. Not only did he design us like himself, God has dominion and designed us to have dominion over all visible things. Now, we were made to look like this. You've seen my circles a million times. We are made triune. God gave us a body to live in, a soul to act with, and a spirit to inform us of God's will for our lives. We are triune beings. So, most importantly, is that spirit person. This is a place for the Spirit of God to dwell within us. Now, this spirit person, complete with God's indwelling presence, operates much like a queen in a chess game. You see, Christ in the person of the Holy Spirit provides our soulish person with divine input, protecting us from ourselves and from our spiritual enemy, Satan. That is the role of Christ, who indwells our spirit in the person of the Holy Spirit. Remember now, the purpose of Satan in this world, according to Jesus, is to do this: to kill, and to destroy. Can I say it again? The purpose of Satan is to kill, to steal, and to destroy. Now, protecting us from our enemies and providing us with divine guidance is why the spirit person is like the queen in a chess game. Now, unfortunately, when Father Adam sinned, when he fell, he died spiritually. And he passed that condition to each one of us. Now, if his life was a chess game, if Adam's life was a chess game, this is the point at which his queen was captured. Suddenly, Adam looked like this. He still had his body and his soul, but because he ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it fed his soul, and his soul engulfed his spirit person. And therefore, the soul of Adam, and all of us who were born in this condition, this is the condition in which we came into the world. We were dead spiritually, just like Adam was dead spiritually. We have no input from this side to the soul. The only thing our souls have is the desires of our body, which constantly makes themselves known to our will, our reason, and our emotion. So what I'm saying to you is very simply this: Adam became dead to his queen, to his spirit person. There was no relationship. He was cut off from his spirit, and his spirit was cut off from him. The spirit could not do the job of protecting him. Here's my point. In the book of Esther, Ahasuerus provides a kind of representation of our bodies and souls. Now this word for body in the Greek is soma. Soma. That is your body. Now you've all heard of that strange disease that people sometimes get. People become psychosomatic. That's when they think they're sick and they're not. But I've known a lot of people who were psychoceramic. They were crackpots. Soma. This is a shorter distance. This is suke, our word psyche. That is our will, our reason, and our emotions. Now, when that soul has no input except the desires of our physical bodies, we put ourselves in dangerous situations, and that's exactly what happened to Ahasuerus, who was the emperor of Persia. Now, because of this, Ahasuerus lost his relationship with his queen. We see that in the book of Esther. Now, the woman to whom Ahasuerus was dead was a woman whose name was Vashti. And as I said, she represents our dead spirit person. Now, this dead relationship can be seen by the events that occurred at a party thrown by the emperor. And believe me, it was some party. You want to hear about a party? Now, here's a party. Listen to this. It lasted for an astounding 180 days. Whoa. That's some party. But don't be too shocked. When I was the king of my own life, my party lasted for 29 years. For an astounding 10,585 days. So why did the king throw such a party? Why did I? Well, for both the king and myself, it was an ego trip. You see, I know this because when our spirit persons are dead, all that remains is vain ego. Ahasuerus threw his party to display the lavish riches he had accumulated for himself. Look at what I have achieved in my life. In fact, listen to the words of Esther 1:4. They read as follows. And whoever is left in any place where he dwells, let all the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, because the free will offerings of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. Now, this is what I want you to see in this verse. It's kind of hard to understand, but I want you to see this. Like Ahasuerus, we were created to have royal standing. See, that's who you are. You were made to be royalty. You were made to rule your kingdom, to rule your lives. Of course, that was to be done with the assistance of your spirit person. But our royal standing is not achieved by what we do or fail to do. In fact, in the book of Psalms, chapter 8, verses 3 and 4, we read these words. Look at this. When I consider your heavens, this is David writing. He's talking to God. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? Now, let's stop right here. This is, of course, a question. David is asking God about this thing, but the psalmist answers his own question in Psalms 8:6, which reads as follows. Now look at the screen. You have made him. Here's the reason God made you. You have made him to have dominion. Didn't I tell you that? Over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. What is God telling you? God is telling you that you are royalty. You are made to have dominion, to rule and reign over things with the assistance of Christ in your spirit person. Now, so we were made by God to be kings and queens and to have dominion over the works of God's hand. Now, God originally intended for all of us to govern both ourselves individually and his earth collectively. Did you notice that in the book of Genesis? These are our God-given domains. But remember this, we were all present in Father Adam when he fell into sin. And when he fell, he died spiritually. And when we were conceived in that condition, dead in trespass and in sin. We lost connection, or we had no connection with the spirit side of ourselves. We too were dead spiritually. And because we fell with Adam, we too could not be what God created us to be. At least we could not be that on our own. So prior to our new birth, our queen, our spirit, was dead to us. In other words, the kingdom had no queen. We were in a state of spiritual dormancy. But you know what? Deep down inside ourselves, we sensed the need for a queen, a spirit in which God could dwell. And the sad truth is this: deep down inside, we have never forgotten who and what we were created to be. It's still down there. It's still in there. Beneath the level of our conscious thoughts, we know that we were made to be something that we're not. You see, we were made to have a functioning spirit person where God dwells, championing our causes and defending us. And we cannot erase that sense of need. It simply will not go away. Now, the book of Esther is clear. Vashti was a beautiful woman, but she was dead to Ahasuerus. She could not help him. She would do what was right, but what was right was not what he wanted. So he began to ignore her existence. He treated her with contempt. So at his massive party, he decided to disgrace her. He would force her to come and display herself before the crowd. Now, this is very nasty talk in the Scripture. I hope you understand what I'm saying to you. And knowing this, that she was about to be displayed this way, she refused to appear. After all, she was dead to him. And she knew it. So as a result, in a fit of anger, the king made a choice from which he could never retreat. He declared publicly that he would no longer have anything to do with her. But we have something so strange introduced at this point of the story that it's mind-boggling. Esther 1:13 tells us this. Look at the screen. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's matter toward all who knew law and justice. So, what is he asking his wise men? Just this: what do I do with this woman? I have this queen, but I have no relationship with her. Furthermore, I hate her. I don't like her. I don't want to be around her. Now, the king understood that her refusal to appear at his party would disgrace him. It would upset his authority. So he passed sentence upon her. Esther 1:19 reads as follows. Look at this. If it pleases the king, now this is the advice he gets. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus. Enough of her. Now here, the king made a declaration. He accepts the advice. He makes this declaration, that Vashti will no longer appear before me. Now what I want you to see is this. When you and I were spiritually dead, we had just such a decree declared over us. Did you know that? In the book of Romans, it's called the law of sin and death. And it's unchangeable. And what that means is this. We have the right to make a choice. God gives us free will. We can choose. But here's the key. We do not have the power to change the results of the choices we make. Ahasuerus could declare that Vashti was dead to him, but he couldn't change what that was going to mean to him. He was free to choose to make this choice, but he was not free to ignore the circumstances. Let me put it this way. Let's say I have before me 2 glasses of liquid. They both look like water. And one is water. 2 glasses, one filled with water. But one is a glass of poison. Now, I know it's a glass of poison. I know I have 2 glasses. One is water, one is poison. Now, I have a choice I can make. I can choose to drink the water, or I can choose to drink the poison. Now, if I choose to drink the poison, I have exercised my own free will. But once I have made that choice, I can no longer control what the results of that choice will be. I have set in motion a law which can never be changed or altered. It's called the law of inevitable consequence. Now, in the book of Genesis, we're told that when Adam and Eve chose to listen to the voice of reason over the voice of revelation, they placed the desires of their physical bodies over their spiritual relationship and fellowship with God. And in so doing, they set in motion a string of circumstances which they were powerless to alter. They had the free will to act. They couldn't determine the circumstances. They had become like Ahasuerus, and they couldn't change it. And that, my friends, is the law of sin and death. According to the Genesis account, in an instant of time, the human spirits of Father Adam and Mother Eve was swallowed up by their souls. Their spirit persons became dormant and unresponsive. They were spiritually dead. And no act of the will could alter that fact. And that condition was passed on to you and to me through the seed of Father Adam. So we were born into this world as purely soulish beings, governed by our own wills, our own reasons, our own emotions. The tragedy is this: our egos, and not God, came to sit upon the throne of our kingdom. And that, my friends, is the explanation, if you ask me, of all the injustice, evil, sin, misery, and darkness in the world around us today. That is the first chapter of the book of Esther. A man who makes bad choices and kills off the source of any goodness in his life. But that changes in the second chapter of the book of Esther. This chapter is really the story of redeeming grace. You see, following his declaration, Ahasuerus found himself searching for something to fill the vacuum in his life. He had no queen. He was empty. He felt alone, estranged. He'd made bad choices, and it was beginning to demonstrate itself to him. He began to experience an inner misery. Oh, by the way, this is the story of every human being without God. Because God is not on the throne of their lives. They are constantly seeking for something to fill that void. It's like Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Remember Wyatt says to him, "Doc, what makes Curly so nasty, so mean?" Doc, in his own Georgia accent, says, "Oh, he's just got a big hole in himself. And no amount of women, no amount of liquor, no amount of what the world considers to be joyous can fill it." That's the situation when you have no queen. So, people without God in their lives feel restless and dissatisfied. They never want to be alone with their own thoughts. Don't let them tell you they do. They don't. So what do? They attempt to anesthetize the pain of their loneliness. They turn to chemicals, like drugs and alcohol, to satisfy them. You know, we read of a similar search in Esther 2, 1 through 4. It reads as follows. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young girls to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given for them. O king, we're going to fill your void. We're going to arrange a queen for you. It won't work. This man is empty, and he is dead. But God is always busy. Doesn't it refresh you to know that even a man like Ahasuerus, the most powerful man in the world, who thinks he has everything, really has nothing? And meanwhile, what's happening? God is busy changing circumstances to bring about a change to the entire world, not just to Ahasuerus, but out of this, something amazing is going to happen to God's people. God operates the chess game. And he is fixing now to change the queen. The queen will be a little Jewish girl. Who would have thunk it? God prepares, and what he does will change the world forever. That will be the story. This is just my introduction. This will be the story of Queen Esther, because she is going to be the one who, in the end, will save the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, from extermination. Because that is where this book heads. A Holocaust greater than that ever imagined by Hitler. But God is in charge, and he is running in front, and the circumstances are going to have to bow down to him. Oh, but you know what? The circumstances in your life have to bow down to him. If you decide you're not going to be the Lord over your own life, because Christ has been born in the spirit persons of all of you, and his role from inside your spirit is to guide and direct you, to empower you, to cause the circumstances in your life to bow down, so that in the end you have victory and not defeat. And that is why the book of Esther must be studied. And beginning next week, Pastor will tell you the story of Esther in 6 amazing sermons.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Don't forget to connect with Ariel Ministries on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our email list at arielministries.com. That's Ariel spelled A-R-I-E-L. We look forward to keeping you updated on upcoming episodes and projects. If you would like to support the missional efforts of Ariel Ministries in Tharaka, Kenya with Each One Feed One, we'd like to remind you that 10% of all donations to Ariel Ministries will support this missional effort. Visit arielministries.com/give for online donations and other methods of giving. To learn more about the Tharaka mission, you can visit arielministries.com/missions. You can also listen to episode 26 for a deeper dive into how our relationship with Each One Feed One and the McCarter family started over 35 years ago, where we are today, and where we're headed in the future.